Let me ask you something straight. What happens when the President of the United States publicly says his patience is running out and backs that statement with aircraft carriers? This isn't just another diplomatic standoff. This isn't another headline buried under election drama or domestic politics. This is about Iran's nuclear program. And according to President Donald Trump, the clock is ticking. Over the past few days, the tone coming out of Washington has shifted, not dramatically, not explosively, but unmistakably. The message is clear. Tehran has until March to reach a deal. If diplomacy fails, the military option is not just on the table, it's being prepared. Now, when a U.S. president talks about military action, that's one thing. Presidents have used tough rhetoric before. But when that rhetoric is accompanied by visible, measurable military buildup in the Persian Gulf, that's when the world starts paying attention. Because this time the Pentagon isn't just posturing. The USS Abraham Lincoln was already deployed in the region, and now joining it, the largest aircraft carrier in the world, the USS Gerald R. Let that sink in. 2 American carrier strike groups in proximity to Iran. That's not symbolic, that's strategic pressure, and when Washington applies pressure like this, history tells us it's never random. The long shadow of the nuclear question. To understand where we are today, you have to go back. Iran's nuclear ambitions have been a point of tension for decades. Tehran insists its program is for peaceful energy purposes. Washington and its allies argue that the enrichment levels, the secrecy, and the underground facilities tell a different story. In 2015, the world believed it had found a solution. The Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, the JCPOA, was signed. Sanctions relief in exchange for strict nuclear limitations and inspections. But that deal didn't survive American politics. Under President Donald Trump, the United States withdrew from the agreement in 2018, calling it weak, temporary, and flawed. Sanctions returned, pressure intensified. Iran responded in stages, gradually increasing uranium enrichment, limiting access for inspectors, and investing more heavily in hardened facilities. Fast forward to today, Iran's enrichment levels are now far beyond what they were under the deal. Experts warn that the breakout time, the time required to produce enough material for a nuclear weapon, has dramatically shortened, and that changes the calculation in Washington. A March deadline and a different tone. The president's warning isn't just about negotiations, it's about credibility. He's effectively drawn a line in the sand. Reach an agreement by March or face consequences, not vague consequences, not symbolic sanctions. He's hinted at military action and not limited surgical strikes. According to his statements, any operation would be more devastating than previous confrontations, designed not just to disrupt, but to paralyze. That language matters, because when you use the word devastating in the context of Iran, you're talking about a country with hardened nuclear facilities buried deep under mountains. You're talking about underground enrichment sites reinforced with concrete and earth layers thick enough to withstand conventional bombing. Satellite imagery reportedly shows construction crews reinforcing tunnel entrances, concrete barriers, additional soil coverage, structural upgrades. Tehran isn't acting like a country that's bluffing. It's acting like a country preparing to survive airstrikes. The carrier message. Let's talk about what 2 carriers actually mean. An aircraft carrier isn't just a floating airstrip. It's a mobile military ecosystem. Each carrier strike group includes destroyers, cruisers, submarines, electronic warfare capabilities, missile defense systems, and dozens of advanced fighter jets. When the USS Gerald R. moves into a region, it signals readiness. It's not necessarily a declaration of war, but it's not routine patrol either. This is maximum leverage diplomacy. Washington's strategy appears to be clear. Apply overwhelming visible military power to force Tehran back to the negotiating table. But here's the problem. Iran doesn't respond to pressure the way smaller states might. Iran has built its entire strategic doctrine around asymmetric resistance, missile networks, proxy militias, cyber capabilities, naval swarm tactics in the Strait of Hormuz. If attacked directly, Tehran wouldn't simply absorb the blow, it would respond, potentially across multiple fronts. The regional anxiety. And this is where things become even more complicated. Arab states in the region are watching carefully. Countries in the Gulf understand that if conflict erupts between Washington and Tehran, they won't be spectators. They'll be within missile range. Oil infrastructure, shipping lanes, civilian populations. The Strait of Hormuz carries a significant percentage of the world's oil supply. Any disruption there doesn't just affect energy markets, it shakes the global economy. We've seen what happens when tensions spike. Oil prices react instantly. Insurance premiums for tankers rise. Markets grow nervous. Now imagine a scenario where actual strikes begin. That's why behind closed doors, Gulf leaders are urging restraint, even while publicly supporting U.S. deterrence. They don't want a nuclear Iran, but they also don't want a regional war. Iran's psychological countermove, while military deployments grab headlines, there's another battlefield, the psychological one. Recently, Iranian state media aired what can only be described as a symbolic threat, a so-called hit list, featuring images of senior Israeli officials, including Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, marked with targeting crosshairs. That's not subtle, that's strategic messaging. Tehran isn't just signaling Washington, it's signaling Israel, because make no mistake, Israel is deeply involved in this equation. For years, Israeli intelligence has conducted covert operations targeting Iran's nuclear infrastructure, sabotage missions, cyber attacks, targeted strikes. Israel sees a nuclear-capable Iran as an existential threat, and when Israel feels existential pressure, it doesn't wait. That's why the Israeli intelligence agency Mossad reportedly issued public appeals encouraging Iranian citizens to contact them. That's psychological warfare layered on top of military signaling, layered on top of diplomatic deadlines. This isn't just tension, it's a multidimensional pressure campaign. The underground factor. Let's focus for a moment on the hardened facilities. Iran learned from past strikes. Last year, certain sites were reportedly damaged, but instead of backing down, Tehran accelerated reconstruction, more fortification, deeper tunneling, advanced centrifuges relocated to more secure environments. This is a cat-and-mouse game between bunker-busting capability and underground engineering. The United States possesses specialized munitions designed to penetrate reinforced structures. But even those have limitations. And if a strike fails to fully destroy Iran's capabilities, then what? You've crossed the threshold into open conflict without eliminating the nuclear risk. That's the strategic gamble. Pressure versus pride. Iran's leadership faces its own calculation, backing down under American threat risks looking weak domestically. The Islamic Republic's political identity is built on resistance to Western pressure. But escalating too far risks catastrophic retaliation. And here's something we often forget. Internal politics matter in Tehran just as much as in Washington. Hardliners argue that nuclear capability guarantees regime survival. Moderates warn that pushing too far could trigger a war that devastates the country's economy and infrastructure. Meanwhile, ordinary Iranians are dealing with inflation, sanctions, currency collapse. They are not thinking about geopolitical leverage. They're thinking about survival, the countdown. So here we are, a deadline approaching. 2 U.S. aircraft carriers positioned within operational range. Iran reinforcing underground facilities. Israel signaling readiness. Arab states urging caution. Global markets watching every move. This isn't just a standoff, it's a high-stakes chess match where each move narrows the options. And the most dangerous moment in any confrontation is when both sides believe backing down would cost more than escalation. The question now isn't whether tensions exist. The question is, will diplomacy catch up to the military buildup before miscalculation takes over? Because once the first strike happens, control becomes an illusion. And history shows us that wars in the Middle East rarely stay contained. We are at a crossroads. March is not just a date, it's a test of deterrence, of diplomacy, and of political will. And what happens next could reshape the balance of power in the region for years to come. Now let's go deeper, because what we're witnessing right now isn't just a military buildup, it's a layered power struggle, diplomatic, psychological, economic, and strategic, unfolding simultaneously. On the surface, this looks like a familiar confrontation. Washington demanding limits on Iran's nuclear program, Tehran resisting under the banner of sovereignty. But beneath that surface, there's a far more complex game being played, the power play behind the curtain. First, let's talk about leverage. President Donald Trump understands something about negotiations. Leverage must be visible to be credible. 2 carrier strike groups, including the USS Gerald R. aren't just military tools, they're bargaining chips. This is coercive diplomacy. The message to Tehran is simple. You are running out of time. We have the capability. Don't test us. But Tehran is also playing for leverage. By reinforcing underground facilities and accelerating enrichment, Iran is signaling, you cannot bomb away our capability easily. And if you try, the consequences will expand beyond our borders. This is a mutual credibility test. If Washington threatens and doesn't act, it weakens deterrence. If Tehran pushes too far and invites action, it risks devastating retaliation. Both sides are walking a tightrope, and neither wants to blink first. Israel's calculus. Now let's bring Israel into sharper focus. For Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, this isn't abstract geopolitics. From Israel's perspective, a nuclear-capable Iran changes the strategic equation permanently. Israel's doctrine has historically been clear: prevent hostile states from acquiring nuclear weapons capability, by force if necessary. We've seen that doctrine before. The difference now? Iran is larger, more fortified, and more regionally embedded than any previous target. The involvement of Mossad, including psychological operations and reported outreach to Iranian citizens, suggests Israel isn't waiting passively. Behind the scenes, intelligence operations are likely intensifying. Cyber operations, surveillance, sabotage contingency planning. Israel's fear isn't just about a bomb, it's about deterrence parity. If Iran reaches a threshold capability, Israel's military freedom of action across the region becomes constrained, and that's a red line for Jerusalem. The Pentagon's real dilemma. From a military standpoint, launching strikes against Iran is not impossible, but it's not simple either. Iran isn't Iraq in 2003. It has layered air defenses, mobile missile systems, proxy networks in Lebanon, Iraq, Syria, and Yemen. If the U.S. initiates a strike campaign, it wouldn't end with a few precision bombs. Iran could retaliate in multiple ways: missile strikes on U.S. bases in the Gulf proxy, attacks on American personnel, Hezbollah escalation against Israel, disruption of shipping in the Strait of Hormuz, cyber attacks on Western infrastructure. The Pentagon understands escalation ladders. The first strike is manageable. The chain reaction is not. And here's the strategic paradox. To avoid a nuclear Iran, you risk igniting a regional war. The economic shockwave. Let's talk about something Americans would feel almost immediately: energy. The Strait of Hormuz is one of the most critical choke points in the global economy. If Iran moves to disrupt shipping, even temporarily, oil prices spike. Insurance rates surge. Markets react within hours. For American families, that means higher gas prices, increased transportation costs, inflationary pressure. And for a president facing political calculations, that's not a minor consideration. War isn't just fought with missiles. It's fought with economic consequences. And Tehran knows this. Iran's strategy has always included the implicit threat: if we can't export oil freely, nobody will. That doesn't mean they want to close the strait tomorrow, but the possibility alone is leverage. The Iranian domestic equation. Now let's step inside Iran. The Iranian government projects defiance externally, but internally, the country faces significant economic stress. Sanctions have strained the currency. Youth unemployment is high. Public frustration simmers beneath the surface. A military strike could rally nationalist sentiment temporarily, but prolonged conflict, that's unpredictable. Iranian leadership must weigh two risks: appearing weak if they concede to U.S. pressure, endangering regime stability if war spirals beyond control. That internal balancing act makes Tehran's decisions more complex than simple defiance. They're not just thinking about Washington. They're thinking about survival, politically and structurally. Three possible scenarios. So where does this go? Let's break it down into three realistic scenarios. Scenario one, a last-minute deal. As the March deadline approaches, quiet diplomacy intensifies. Back-channel talks, European mediation, regional intermediaries. Iran agrees to cap enrichment at specific levels in exchange for partial sanctions relief. Washington declares victory, claiming strength-forced concessions. Tehran claims dignity, framing it as balanced compromise. Tensions cool. Military assets remain, but war is avoided. This is the least dramatic outcome. And historically, high-pressure diplomacy often ends this way, but it requires both sides to accept partial wins instead of total victories. Scenario two, limited military strikes negotiations fail. The U.S. launches targeted strikes against specific nuclear facilities, precision munitions, carefully calibrated messaging, clear red lines communicated. Iran retaliates, but in controlled fashion. Missile strikes limited. Proxy actions symbolic but restrained. The conflict flares, then stabilizes. This is the controlled escalation model. The risk? Control is theoretical. Once missiles fly, miscalculation becomes a real possibility. Scenario 3, regional escalation. This is the most dangerous path. Initial strikes trigger broader retaliation. Hezbollah opens a northern front against Israel. Militias target U.S. bases. Shipping routes are disrupted. Oil markets surge. What began as a nuclear standoff becomes a multi-front regional conflict. And once multiple actors are involved, de-escalation becomes exponentially harder. No one publicly wants this scenario. But history shows us that wars often begin not because leaders want them, but because deterrence fails. The bigger question. At its core, this crisis isn't just about uranium enrichment, it's about power balance. If Iran crosses a certain nuclear threshold, the Middle East enters a new strategic era. If the U.S. launches a large-scale strike, it reshapes regional alliances. If Israel acts independently, it tests American coordination. Every path carries consequences. And the March deadline is not just a calendar marker, it's a psychological countdown. The military assets are visible. The rhetoric is firm. The fortifications are strengthening. Now the real question becomes this: will strength force compromise? Or will pressure ignite the very conflict it's meant to prevent? Because in geopolitics, the most dangerous moments aren't when enemies shout the loudest. They're when both sides believe they have no choice left. And right now, that's the line the world is approaching. The next few weeks won't just determine the future of Iran's nuclear program. They may define the strategic trajectory of the Middle East for the next decade. And for Americans watching from home, this isn't distant. It touches energy prices, military deployments, global stability. The pieces are in place. The only question left is, who moves first and what price will follow?